Hi guys, my name is Inanula and I share with you years of personal experience in the fashion industry, giving you key insights into buying and merchandising skills. I just wanted to share an interesting conversation that I had with somebody really interesting from the industry who I connected with. And I thought it might be useful to anybody who's interested in pursuing different parts of the fashion industry because, as we all know, there are so many roles available in the fashion and retail industry, and sometimes some of those roles don't get touched upon or we don't know enough about them. And so I met an amazing pattern cutter who has been pattern cutting for so many years, all her life, over 30 years in the industry, just doing pattern cutting. And so I will just share with you the conversation that we had, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. When we're amazing. Yes, so we're on now, and I'll just reintroduce you. So today I'm meeting with Margaret Stott, and we connected online over LinkedIn, and I thought your profile was really outstanding. Margaret Stott is a senior pattern cutter, and you've done it for so many years. And okay, you want to correct me, I'll let you go.
I am now retired.
Okay, brilliant. Yes, so you were a senior pattern cutter or pattern maker, and we're here to talk with you, and you can inform us about what you do. Amazing. Okay. So I think the first thing everybody would want to know is, what is a pattern cutter? What does a pattern cutter do?
Well, the pattern cutter, in my view, is the architect of the clothing. Just like you need plans to build a building, and then you get all the trades to come and bricklay and do the electrics, the pattern cutter has to write not just the paper pattern or card pattern, or these days the digital pattern that will be used to cut out all the fabric pieces, but they have to understand and embed into that pattern how it will be sewn, how it will be used by the user. You don't just make paper pieces that are going to go together to make the dress. How do you get it on and off? What's the fabric going to be made of? Who's the user? Is it going to be graded? Which factories is it going to be made in? What type of machinery have they got? There's a whole host of things that is probably not obvious that a pattern cutter, I'm going to say a good pattern cutter, will keep in mind, that they're not just making the pieces for cutting and then forgetting about the rest. They need to know everything.
Amazing. Very artisan, very also far away from what we usually see. We always see the person who designs it, maybe the person who wears it, the head of the company who has, marketed for it and all of this. But it's just great to know that there's this far away from it as well. So what other colleagues do you interact with in that process making who we're also not aware of on the front lines?
Well, there's a number of things really that when I started as a pattern maker, you were very much in the factory hands-on with other people. So the designer would bring me and we would sit together and work out what they wanted, and I would make a pattern, and then I'd have a sample machinist and we'd sample it. The designer would look at it with me, and I'd got it wrong or there was some minor adjustments. We were a close-knit team. Back in those days, the receptionist to your business was often the fit model. So you'd bring her in from the front desk, you'd try it on, and then it would be approved or not, and off we'd go. That is far removed from a designer sending a specification to a factory, China, Europe, I don't know where, even in the UK, and the pattern cutter right down the back of the factory having to have this translated, maybe not the body shape that they're used to, maybe they've got dress stands, maybe they haven't, and they have to do the best they can. So I always championed designers and buyers to think of that chain, that when you're sending a specification, very simple things, are you sure it's in centimetres or in inches? Because some people work in inches, some people work in centimetres. Is it really obvious? These are just small things. But then if you send them to India, the pattern cutters are often men, and they don't know what a Western figure is like. So you're asking them to make something for a figure they're not familiar with, and maybe they're not familiar with fitting on a woman anyway. You know, things have changed, but it's slow in coming. So there is a wide range of things to think about from the designer and buyer's perspective now to the pattern cutter, that chain to the pattern cutter who's actually going to make your pattern. I don't know if that
really nice question. No, that's perfect. Yeah. I think maybe you could take us through the background, because you're speaking from a specific point in time. Maybe you could take us through the background of your time when you started. What did you need to be a pattern cutter, and how long were you a pattern cutter for? And you know, because things now, I'm sure you're aware of, like computerized pattern cutting and things like that. What are your views of like where you were and where things are now in the pattern cutting world?
I'll tell you about that, because I learned obviously manual pattern cutting on a bench with paper and shears.
Yes.
But there came a time, and I was there, when grading became done on computers. Okay. So your pattern had to go into a computer for the next person. I'm going to call it the grader and not the operator or technician. Don't like those words. Could mean anything.
Right.
The grader will grade the pattern. And that's a very natural step to, well, why don't you make the pattern on the computer? So when you're working with, let's say, repeat items, let's take a sweatshirt. You go in and you buy a sweatshirt, you want it to fit pretty much as it's always fitted, but it's going to be in a different colour, it's going to have a different logo on the front, maybe some more seaming, but you want that fit to be the same. So you will have a block on your computer that you can then adapt. And that is wonderful, because instead of having to get something off the rack, trace around it with your pencil, you can just copy and carry on. So I think computer pattern cutting is wonderful. My hands from all the scissors are very happy not to have be cutting anymore. So I think computer pattern cutting is great. I think one of the misunderstandings is that the computer cuts the pattern. It does not. It only does what it's told. So
sorry, I didn't quite get that bit after you said the computer.
The computer only does what it's told.
Right, okay.
So you need a competent pattern cutter to make the patterns on computer. It's not a computer somebody who's good at computers. So there's an overlap with people like me from the last century, and people who are very computer literate have to get together. So somebody may be very good on the system, know the commands, can do everything they're asked, but they don't really understand the computer, the pattern making. The same is true of the pattern maker who doesn't understand the capabilities of the computer. So we're in that transitional stage, and I think we're over a hump, actually. I think a lot of modern or younger pattern cutters are very au fait with computers. You know, they know all the Adobe suite and all of that, and it's all very intuitive to them. So I think we've come over a big hump from when I first started, which was around 2000. So in 24, 25 years, you've really moved on the capabilities of computer pattern cutting. And of course, one of the big things is that you can email your pattern. When I was in that transitional stage, or years ago, we had to copy around card patterns. We had to trace around them, cut them out, and send them off to the factory. Now you just email it. You know, it could get lost. Somebody could have written it wrongly. You might lose a piece. Not on computer, because what comes in the file is the whole pattern. So I think that's great.
Sorry, I've got a little baby with me. He's occupying himself. Thank you so much for that background. I'm also quite positively inspired to hear that you actually do like that technological wave. I do know a lot of people who like the artisan of the paper, and actually they would go from doing it on the form, then putting it down, like they go on the form with a muslin, then put it down, then trace that onto a paper, and they feel like doing it technologically takes that real feel away. But I really do like your insight, because you're understanding that now, things can be sent easier, things can move faster. Essentially, we can really move into a.
Well, I don't disagree with them.
Okay.
There's nothing like draping some fabric and seeing what happens on the stand, or doing something there's a lot of things you can do in your hands when you cut and paste and twist and what have you. You can't do that on a computer. I mean, they say you can with 3D rendering, but actually it's not that easy. And so to do it, I would do half and half. If I had a new shape, that was different from all the blocks I've got, then I would do it by hand, get it to a stage, and then digitize it into the computer, and then finish it off with the seam allowances, the grain line, how many to cut, all that sort of routine stuff, which is still creative, because you've got to get it right. You can't say cut one sleeve when you need a pair. You've got to make sure that the information you put in is correct. So I think there's a case for both sides. But at some stage these days, the pattern will have to go into a computer for grading, for marker making, for emailing, all around the world, wherever.
Okay, thanks for that. I think also it would be great to understand from the perspective a day in the life of a pattern cutter, because I'll use an example of me from the buying and merchandising world. Monday is a specific day, it's trade day. We look at bestsellers and things. Tuesdays is allocation day. So do you have the same thing in pattern cutting routine?
It's not on a daily basis, but there's overlap of things. So you might be starting on a new collection. So you've been given 10 items which need to go into some sort of what would you call it? Press day or something, or a show, and they have got to be done. They've got to be done by a certain time. But at the same time, you will have the buyers doing their first fits, and coming back and saying, could you make these amendments? And you have to fit them in because they've got factories booked for production and you have to make your amendments as you're going. So you might be halfway through a pattern, have to stop, make those amendments, send that pattern off, and then come back to your creative stuff. So there's always an overlap of what you're doing that's forward thinking, what's in production now, and if something's come back and they say they want to do it in another colour, say, or a slightly different fabric, you might need to make amendments for that. Now, for me personally, that wasn't an issue because the amendments could be done in another factory.
Okay.
And I could speak volumes on that if you wanted me to.
Yes, go for it. We'd love to hear it all.
So the day is variable. You could have garments coming into your, just as a pattern cutter. I had, in the studio there was some sample machinists, and when there was a collection going on, we might bring in some extra sample machinists because we had a bit of a, your workload goes like that, and then it all slims down. One of the issues that I think needs to be fully understood is the role of the garment technologist.
Okay.
I think it's a really skilled position where they have to piggy in the middle, deal with the buyers and their expectations and the realities of what a factory can do. Oh, love, dear. That was years ago. So not only do they have to understand the pattern making, and good ones will put their hand up and say, look, I'm not sure how we fit this, but it's not working for me. And listen to either the pattern cutter in the room, or these days the pattern cutter often isn't. They're the last person down this whole chain of specification, comments, translation from one language to another, and then it ends up on this poor person's desk and they just go, don't know what to do here.
Right.
They want me to cut it without a dart, and it won't fit if it doesn't have a dart, So there's these technical things that people ask you to do, and they don't understand the intricacies of what you've done. Or like, say, take the zip out. Well, if I take the zip out, I can't get it over the head. But we need it cheaper, and the zip costs money. So you're always aware that the buyer is juggling the budget. The garment technologist is trying to make the best product for their business, and the pattern cutter is trying to understand, and often isn't told just what's required. This is I don't know what the words to use are, but I'm sort of out of it but you want your cheap one that's going to go in at a price point, and then you want your luxury one that's going to have all the extra buttons and buttonholes and a jigger button, but the cheap one's not. They're going to have 2 buttons and no jigger button. So you need to understand where your market is for your garment. And as a pattern cutter, sometimes you really don't know that. And you don't understand why they're asking you for things. So I feel if the comments that are put into a specification, some of which go back to the pattern cutter, some go to the buyer to do blues and greens and which button to have and whatnot. I think if that could be a little bit more sympathetic to letting the person who's doing the job understand
what it's for,
great deal with. Yes, if you say to somebody increase or decrease and it's not their first language, they might mix those two up. So increase by adding 1 centimetre, decrease by taking away 1 centimetre. So you really are clear as to what they should be doing. Otherwise, I've seen some very strange amendments made. I also think the amendments should be made by the person who made the pattern in the first place, but that's another thing.
Right.
I've seen places where they say, we'll get the junior to do that. And the junior's just not up to it, They just don't know what they're doing.
It's someone else's work at the end of the day.
Somebody else's work. They do what they're told. Whereas a pattern cutter would go, "Oh, okay, I see what you're trying to get at. Well, I'm going to do it a slightly different way than what you've told me, because I can see what you want, but there is another way to do it, which the junior person may not." And I've seen patterns go backwards and forwards and then hands up in the air. So. So I'm opinionated, but I'm out of the industry now. So
no, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to hear. I'll take it into more so, again, maybe we'll go further back, like qualifications. What did you study to be qualified to be a pattern cutter? And what would you advise somebody who thinks that sounds like something I want to do, that's more hands-on, it's, the architectural side of fashion. What would you advise them to study and do to be qualified?
I haven't done any for years because I've stepped out of it and I'm very much a granny doing grannying things now. But I used to give guest lectures and talks at the Textile Institute, and one of them I gave the title of "Pattern Cutting is Designing."
Amazing.
Because you need to know the trims, you need to know the buttons, you need to know the lining, you need to know that it's a coat that goes over winter jumpers or a coat that's just going over a posh frock and doesn't need extra room. You are making the decisions of the shape, the how big the lapels are. You're given a sketch, but telling me that it needs to be 7 centimetres when I think it should be 8. It's restrictive on the specification side. When you're making a pattern, you should be thinking of everything. How does it do up? Where is the top button? Is it going to have a pocket? Can I get my hands in that pocket? Does it have an inside pocket? Is it going to be big enough for whatever it is? It used to be mobile phones, but these days it's other things. If you're doing uniforms, it might be pens and a notepad for whatever your work is. So when you're pattern cutting, for me, it's better than being a designer, because somebody's given you the materials they'd like to use and the trims. You haven't had to go out and source that. But within that, you then make the best product you can. And if they say I want big buttons, then what you do for your button stand is going to be different to if it's tiny buttons or a zip up. So these are all the considerations that as a pattern cutter you do. I would say that if you're going to be a designer, and I've taught in colleges where you teach design, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you really need to understand pattern cutting properly as well. You may never be a pattern cutter, but if you don't, then you will not have the depth of knowledge. And when I've worked with designers, those that have pattern cutting, even if they haven't gone on to do it for their career, they have a much deeper understanding and a better outcome. I worked with a designer once who loved skirts with no darts. Well, you tell me how you get from the hip to the waist without some sort of suppression. They wouldn't have it. It was just going to be cut straight. It never worked, Whereas somebody else who say, well, you don't want darts, but we need to shape it. So shall we use some seams, or shall we put some other detail in so we can get the shaping, but it's not actually darts? And then you have a discussion and you get a good outcome. I started college long before they did degrees in this. It was a diploma course. It was called Clothing. It was at the Medway College of Art and Design in Kent. And we did lots of different modules. We did designing, we did pattern cutting, we did life drawing, we did some millinery, we did some embroidery, we had a tailoring class, we had what they called a couture class. So you learn different ways of doing the same thing. What you do in a tailoring class will be a different approach to what you do in a couture class. Different qualities of fabric, different price points, all that sort of thing. And I just fell in love with pattern cutting. It was creative, and some pattern cutters or designers like to design that way. Instead of drawing a picture, you take the cloth and you say, well, what will this cloth do? And all the great couturiers did that. They had an idea, but it was honed on the stand, on the body. How does this drape? Where do I need a dart? How much fullness do I need in the skirt? That all comes with working with the pattern and the fabric rather than a piece of paper. and a specification, you know.
That, yes. In my own course, I did fashion design and technology. And again, I'm no designer, I'm fine merchandising. And one of the staple segments in that course was pattern cutting. So I completely agree. For yourself, though, it's really good you've got the broad understanding. You got some depth there in tailoring, in casual wear. I'm sure you probably even did underwear, that sort of patterns and stuff. Which area did you find yourself becoming, more profound in, or what was your field of expertise? Because I understand you did women's wear, is that correct?
Yes, it was women's wear, and back in the 70s and 80s, you weren't a tailoring pattern cutter. You weren't an evening wear. You did you did everything. You did a few dresses, you did some blouses, you did some trousers, then you needed a coat. So I felt very fortunate that I worked on all of what you might call women's outerwear softs, and women's tailoring, which is not as technical as men's, but you're going to record this. What I would say is, as much as I admire Savile Row tailors, I mean, they're wonderful and they make beautiful, beautiful things. I used to be in awe of it, thinking that menswear was so much harder to cut than women's wear. It isn't.
Really?
We don't have bosoms. And bosoms is the whole thing. How do you cut to go over bosoms and into a waist and over a hip? Men are like that. You don't have to worry about that. You just cut it flat, give a bit of shape on the shoulder, and the rest is all just how you handle it. But how do you get over bosoms? And that was it was a light bulb moment. Oh, okay, all right. How can I make this look nice and fit a woman without too much overt shaping? So, no, I loved all of it. I never did underwear as such, but when you do evening wear, you often have to cut to fit around the bosom properly. You need like a bra cut to fit. So my work touched on that rather than underwear. Underwear is a whole different thing because they're using different fabrics and underwires and laces and stretchy nets. And
okay, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas we would do, say, hot pants and a little top that had to fit, but you wouldn't call it underwear.
I see. Really fascinating stuff. I think we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
You've given us so much inside information. I'm really appreciative of your time. And
I feel like a scarecrow here, but
no, we've come for the knowledge. So
you're going to go to design school, learn pattern cutting, because it will open doors for you.
Yes, certainly.
And it doesn't mean you leave design behind. It means that you get right into it. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, dear. Yes, I'm definitely going to have to wrap this up, unfortunately. Thank you so much. And
that's all right.
What I will say is I will get questions and stuff off of this. If you don't mind, I'll be pinging you messages.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's
stuff. Fine. Yeah.
But thank you so much. Have a nice day.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.